I'm beginning the show right at the top with Jim Garrity of National Review. You hear him on The Editors, you hear him on Three Martini Lunch podcast, you read his Morning Jolt from National Review almost every day. I hope you do at least. But I really wanted to talk to him today because of a book he wrote a long time ago, Voting to Kill. When did you write that book, Jim?
2006, and it came out 2 months before the 2006 midterms, and it was a really good time to publish a book about how 9/11 and the threat of terrorism and Islamist terrorism were going to keep Republicans in power forever.
Yeah,
Which, as you know,
I,
September 2006 is when they came out, and thank you for your help promoting that book and the enormous help you've been for all the books I've written since then that I will ever send to you. Yeah, by the way, I should point out the book was not prescriptive, or it's not saying that, but yeah, it was right around 2006. The electorate was like, yeah, we're not worried about Al Qaeda anymore.
well, that's it. We're not worried about Al Qaeda anymore. But you know something about Al Qaeda. And the reason I bring it up is because we've got a situation developing in Syria, and I thought I would ask you. People remember Osama bin Laden very well. They mostly might remember Zawahiri as number two, the Egyptian that was really the brains behind the organization. A few people remember Zarqawi, who went crazy in Iraq for a few years. And most people probably remember Baghdadi because of Donald Trump's press announcement that he died like a dog, right? So my question to you is, do you have a fix on Jolani in Syria? Do you? Because there was a
Yeah.
massacre this week in Sweden. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. There was a massacre early of the Alawites. I'm beginning to wonder whether or not we haven't got another Taliban on our hands here, another ISIS.
So part of it is Hugh. You know, I was in Syria in March this year, right?
No, I did not know that.
Okay, apparently I'm doing a terrible job of promoting that. And yes, so at the tail end of my Ukraine trip, my buddies who I travel with, who were ecstatic to see Assad toppled, said we should go over there. And most of my friends, some friends who work in the intelligence world, defense world, folks like that, were all happy to see Assad go, but they were very wary about the guys taking over. They are HTS. BTS is the Korean guys that your grandchildren are really excited about. They're the Korean K-pop group. HTS is, let's face it, Islamist. Now, they are an offshoot of ISIS, and in fact, broke away from ISIS and got into a giant rivalry with ISIS. So now they actually hate ISIS. So that's the good news. Jelani, since the takeover and the toppling of Assad back in December, had been saying a lot of the right things. He met with Trump. He had said, we have no interest in a fight with Israel. Let's also point out that what's left of the armed forces in Syria after 13 years of civil war doesn't really have any capacity to fight a war with Syria. So when people are saying, oh, the Israeli jets were refueling over Syrian airspace and Syria did nothing about it, Syria didn't really have any options to do anything about that. Their planes were built by the Soviet Union, right? So they had no
Yep.
capacity to go up there and do anything to stop it. But they were basically saying, look, we're not interested in a continuing fight. We need to rebuild from a terrible, devastating civil war. We're interested in reconnecting with the West. Yes, we are devout Muslims, but we are not interested. We want to live with the Druze. We want to live with the Syrian Christian population. They were saying all the right things. Whether they were doing that was less clear on the answers. Like I said, I was there in the beginning of March. Second week of March, they had that terrible massacre in the Latakia area, which, oh, by the way, I had visited a couple days earlier, and no, that didn't freak me out at all. Um, and so I wrote on that a Washington Post column, very skeptical, saying, well, it was really nice to have about 3 months of peace, and now it looks like that's over again. Things calmed down again. Trump met with them. They're all, basically enormous chunks of the Syrian people are just sick and tired of war, want to rebuild the economy, want to go back to having a normal life, are perfectly happy to reconnect. You go to places like Idlib, which is kind of where the Islamists come from, where they have it's not the flag of ISIS, but it is the Al-Shara, which is the Arabic script in black letters on white lettering. The ISIS flag was a black background and white lettering. So it's totally different, nothing to worry about. They're like my traveling buddies who are all as pallid as I am. We got some not hostile stares, but there were a lot of like, what the heck are you guys doing here? And it was definitely a sense of like these folks want to live very traditionally, very religiously, and you could see there being problems. I think Jelani, look, HTS is a big group, and I actually spoke to a guy over there who Hugh was just the nicest guy you're ever going to talk to, who's on an international terrorist watch list and banned from traveling outside of the country and stuff, but who basically was like, look, people think we're crazy Islamists like the Taliban. We're nothing like that. When we walk into a coffee shop, we don't take things the way the old Assad people do. We stand in line and we pay just like normal citizens and stuff. So on the one hand, there is this concept of a rule of law and being good citizens at least amongst some of them. On the other hand, they're Islamists. And you kind of never know when these guys are going to get riled up and say, okay, it's time to go out and show the Druze who's boss and go kill a whole bunch of them. HTS is a very big group. There's an effort to turn HTS into a traditional Syrian army, structured, organized, not this kind of warlord roving band type. I would say I saw while I was over there, Syria probably had had a rougher 13-year stretch than any other country on earth, and it made the rebuilding that needs to be done in Ukraine look like an HGTV project. Like everywhere we went in Syria, there were buildings that were just demolished from all the fighting, and whole neighborhoods outside of Damascus that were just rubble and abandoned. And this was like 6-7 years ago, and nobody had ever come back there. So I would like for the United States to work with them where we can. I think there's going to be a lot of trust but verify. I think there's going to need to be a lot of baby steps. It's understandable that we're going to see things out of this government that we're not going to like. And when they do things like that, we're going. By the way, it's worth noting, Jelani came out and said that this latest massacre or attempt of the Druze, this is unacceptable. This is not what we stand for. We're going to track down whoever did this. We're going to get them. Now, it's also what he said over the Latakia massacres.
I'm glad you said, because I listened to a podcast today by Haviv Rettig-Gur, who is interviewing an Israeli Druze, who tells me the Jolani MO is to wait for a local disturbance, in one case Alawite, most recently Druze, and then send in his killers to machete everyone and destroy basically the ethnic minority group. First the Alawites, now the Druze, but the Israelis said, not our Druze. Druze are our friends. There are Druze in Israel. We're not going to let you do it. Okay, there's my exit question. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very optimistic, 1 being not a chance, where's Jelani land on turning out well in Jim Garrity's mind?
Probably right around a 5. It's good that he's saying all the right things. It's good that he recognizes that look, we've all seen the crazy foreign dictators with the machetes in the air, waving and saying, we will slaughter. It's good that he's not saying that sort of thing. It's good that he wears a suit. It's good that he says he wants to engage with the West, our allies. We're lifting sanctions and trying to restore something resembling normal diplomatic relations and normal trade relations with the new Syrian regime before we did. So, look, there are some signs of positivity there. Like I said, there are plenty of Syrians who want to put all this behind them and just live in peace. Whether Jelani's the rare guy. Like, he's been a guest of our government in one of our prison camps in Iraq because he went to join Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Then he joined ISIS. And then he split off and formed his own group here. I completely understand why somebody looks at this guy and says, once an Islamist, always an Islamist. I don't believe this guy's changed. We can't trust him, and we got to look at him as another potential Mullah Omar or al-Baghdadi or something like that.
All right, Jim, you've got enough to do for the Post and the National Review, but we are now assigning you from the editor's desk that you've got to keep track of Jelani for the American audience because you do that as a side gig for America, and you have been doing it for 20 years. Jim Garrity, thank you. Follow him at Jim Garrity on X. Read him in the Washington Post. Of course, get the Morning Jolt. Listen to the 3 Martini Lunch, and, of course, the editors. I want to finish now by doing my relief factor early, because today I only got 4 miles in because it was a blistering, hot, and gross day. And I had intended to go out and do 6, and I said, I'm just going to do 4. I'm going to go take my relief factor right here, and I do it on the air, so that everyone watching the Salem News Channel knows, for real. All right, there's the real package. There's the real me taking it. I do that every single day because I try and get in my miles every single day, and I try to do for you what I think most people ought to do who endorse products. Prove that they actually use the product. which I do with every sponsor on the Hugh Hewitt Show. If you hear me talking about them, I am using them, and I've been using Relief Factor for more than 10 years. I wish you would give it a try. Call them at 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, or head over to their website, find the starter pack, $19.95. You can also ask for that when you call them. And the starting pack is $19.95, 3-week supply, less than $1 a day. Go and get it at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. My next guest has been a regular on whatever platform I've been on for the past 30 years, Mr. Speaker, Newt Gingrich. He's back. Mr. Speaker, good to see you. I hear you got hurt last week. I hope you're feeling better.
Oh, I'm fine. I pulled my left shoulder. I didn't tear it. I just pulled it, but it's now better.
That's what I wanted to hear, because if you had torn your rotator cuff, I was going to tell you, don't do the surgery. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. I have in my hand Trump's Triumph. I want to tell people they want to read this book. I want to thank you. It's inscribed. Now, I get about 30 books a week because I'm a talk show host. You and Richard Nixon are the only two guys I know who actually go to the length of inscribing books for media people. When did you develop that discipline?
Probably from Richard Nixon. I don't know. It just seems to me, look, if you, as busy as you are, if you're going to take the time to look at my book, I kind of owe it to make it personal. And, you know, I try to write books that matter, and I'm always honored. You've had a huge impact on the country, and having a chance to be with you and talk about this is a great honor.
Well, there's so much to do. I'm going to focus in on two areas, politics and defense. And I want to start with defense, Chapter 11, a system that works. When you told the story about George Marshall and the head of the cavalry, which I'd like you to tell again for the audience, I thought, holy smokes, I know World War II pretty well, and I have never heard about that before. Please let the audience know.
Well, George Catlett Marshall, who was the head of the Army, which at that time included the Air Force, was one of the real keys to how we did so well in World War II. And one of the things he did is he got rid of things that didn't work. And in the summer of 1940, after the Germans had gone through Poland, and after they had gone through Holland, Belgium, and France, Marshall called in the commandant of cavalry and said, what have you done? What lessons have you learned from this blitzkrieg, this armored warfare? And the guy looked at him with great sincerity and said, well, we've been studying this very hard, and we have concluded that we need trucks that can carry the horses close to the forward edge of battle so that they're really fresh when we launch our cavalry charge. Marshall looked at him for a minute and said, that's been very, very helpful. He left. He called in his then Secretary Beadle Smith and said, I want you to retire him as of now, and I want you to close the office of Commandant of Cavalry as of 5 o'clock today. Because it was clear the guy could not adjust to the modern world. And I use that as an example. You know, it's not how much money you spend on defense. It's how well you spend the money you're going to spend on defense. It's the ideas. It's the understanding of the modern world. And I have been an advocate of reform my entire career, going back to, in 1981, helping found the Military Reform Caucus. So I'm very much for a strong defense. I worry very much about a large bureaucracy, which behaves like all large bureaucracies, slow, backward-looking, and protecting its weakest elements.
I thought it was fascinating that you quoted Ike's farewell speech, but also that you stressed we need to focus on war winning and not war fighting. Now, I'm going to take an interim jump till I come to today. 45 years after Marshall discharges the head of cavalry, right before we get into the war, we have Goldwater Nunn and Goldwater Nichols. And you're a big part of Goldwater Nichols in 1986. Tell people what we did in 1986, because it's been another 40 years since then. And so we're ready for another dose of top to bottom reform.
You know, it was one of those weird American things. President Reagan decided to liberate the island of Grenada. We landed there and we discovered that the Army radios couldn't talk to the Navy radios. And an Army captain had to go to a payphone, use his credit card, call a friend in the Pentagon to call a friend in the Navy, etc. That becomes such a symbol of dysfunction that the Goldwater-Nichols bill, which required jointness, it required that all the services learn to work with each other. And I was one of the people, there were many people involved, but I was one of them. And what was interesting was every active duty 4-star general and admiral, everyone opposed us. Ronald Reagan opposed us. The Secretary of Defense opposed us. But they couldn't answer this question. How can you claim a system works when a captain has to go to a payphone to use his credit card? And the Congress passed it, the president signed it. Every senior officer today, and I'm the longest serving teacher in the senior military, I've been teaching major generals since 1983. Every senior officer today will tell you that jointness is one of our greatest strengths, that we operate as a single team. None of that was true in 1986. And we need to have, frankly, a similar, very robust rethinking of our defense system today.
Well, let's start right there. I'm a civilian, but my family is Navy. We have people in the carrier community, people in the special forces community, people in the intel community. My carrier family members tell me we absolutely must have carriers. I think to myself, my gosh, I think they're targets now. What do you think about our orientation to big platforms, and do we need to move away from it?
I think that we need to rethink from the ground up the lessons we're learning, for example, in Ukraine. The Ukraine using relatively inexpensive drones drove the Russian Black Sea fleet into having to withdraw because they couldn't survive. I have yet to see, the Chinese have an enormous number of merchant ships. You could put 20, 30, 40 drones on every merchant ship. They're the equivalent of an aircraft carrier. Now, you would take huge casualties, you'd lose a lot of ships, but Admiral Nelson, who was the key to winning in Trafalgar, the most famous British admiral in history, said one time, numbers annihilate. And I think that we probably should have built our last aircraft carrier, and we should be thinking about totally new methods of warfare, totally new approaches. And frankly, we ought to have some people out there right now looking at the battlefield of 2040 and 2050 and imagining real-time robotics, artificial intelligence, all the things that are coming down the road, all the assets in space, and recognize these are not going to be survival. These old systems aren't going to survive. One of the things I've been thinking about writing, the French battled the English 3 times in about a century, at Crécy, Poitiers, and Agincourt. All 3 times, the French heavy cavalry was wiped out.
I thought you missed. You wrote that chapter so elegantly, weaving in George Catlin Marshall, Agincourt, and modern transformation of the military. Quick exit question to the break, Mr. Speaker. Would you think the president ought to reprogram money and just give big dollops to people like Palantir and Anduril to develop new death rays or whatever we need for the next century?
I think we should, and also to small companies. Look, a lot of the great breakthroughs are, the companies you just described weren't very big 20 years ago. So we ought to be just doling money out to lots of wildcatters, have people out there entrepreneurially trying to succeed, and then test them on the battlefield. Take them out to White Sands, New Mexico, or out somewhere in Nevada. Do they work or not work? If they work, buy them, even if the company doesn't have any lobbyists. Go ahead and buy it just because it works.
I'm going to be right back with Speaker Gingrich. I'm going to talk to him during the break about the Vatican. That's not in Trump's triumph, but if you get Trump's triumph, you will get a comprehensive overview of where he has been, where he is going, and what needs to be done. But I'm going to do a little Catholic talk with Speaker. You're married to the wonderful Ambassador Gingrich. She was our ambassador to the Vatican in Trump's first term, which meant she had to deal with Pope Francis. You weren't there when Leo walked out or Pope Bob. But you know the Vatican pretty well. How surprised were you? What do you expect out of the Vatican now?
I was very surprised. Callista was not as surprised.
Really?
We had just finished her hearing to become the ambassador to Switzerland. And so we went to a lunch to celebrate having gotten through the hearing. And we were standing there at Cafe Milano with our good friend Franco Nocesi, who's very close to the church. And all of a sudden there's white smoke. And white smoke, of course, means that the conclave has picked a pope. And Callista says, I'm not going to be shocked if it is in fact who became Pope Leo. He'd been in Peru a long time. I think the Latin Americans all thought he was a Latin American pope. Of course, he's a White Sox fan. I'll let other people decide how good or bad that is. He's clearly American, and he's clearly exactly what the church needs right now: common sense, practical, good sense of humor, trying to consolidate and calm the church down. Pope Francis was exactly what he intended to be. When you pick St. Francis of Assisi as the person whose name you're choosing, you're sending a signal about how bold you're going to be and how disruptive you're going to be. And he was. On the other hand, if you take Pope Leo XIII, who's the great modernizer of the church in the 1890s, and who really creates the base of all social doctrine for the church, and now you pick his name as Pope Leo XIV, you're sending a signal of concern for the poor, but in a very methodical, thoughtful way that, after all, over a century ago, laid the basis for all modern Catholic thinking about the modern world and the role of the poor and the world of the working poor. So I think he's probably going to be a remarkably effective pope. I noted that he's going to Castel Gandolfo to spend a couple of weeks supposedly vacationing. And then they said, oh, by the way, while he's down there, he's writing an encyclical, which I guess if you're a pope, that's your idea of time off and relaxing.
Well, I'm a cradle Catholic. I'm very optimistic because I think an American of my age is going to have a better sense of America and how not to distance the church from America. And I think Francis, whether he intended to or not, created a great chasm, and a chasm that we cannot endure. Until President Trump won in 2016, the single greatest surprise in American political history was Newt Gingrich's win in 1994 when the House went from Democrat to Republican control. I was anchoring for KCET, a PBS affiliate, no longer publicly funded by the end of the weekend, I hope, when Chris Cox walked in and said, if anyone told you they saw this coming, they're lying. Mr. Speaker, when you write in Trump's Triumph about how to do politics coming up in the next cycle, you write a few things I want to call to people's attention. One, it is not inevitable that Republicans lose. Now, the title chart suggests that they would. Why do you think it's not inevitable?
Well, because I think, first of all, if you look at Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1934, where they gained seats because they're in the middle of a revolution. President Trump represents a profound, fundamental change in Washington, and it's a change most Americans want. And my hunch is that by next summer, between the bill they just signed, the work he's doing on tariffs, a number of other steps about investments, things like the project in Philadelphia or in Pittsburgh, where they announced $50 billion in additional investments. All of that, I think, by the summer of 2026 is going to lead to the Trump boom. And the choice that fall is going to be between a Marxist socialist party with weird social ideas, led by people like Mondami and AOC, and a Republican Party committed to fixing Washington, growing an American economy, and protecting American interests. I think in that case, we could pick up seats in the House and the Senate on a scale nobody today could imagine.
So you write in Trump's Triumph, we need a positive national mood. Trump can do this if he's mixing up with the media. The grandfather clock in Rubio, that was so perfect in terms of creating national mood. But his numbers right now don't suggest that the country's very happy. Are the numbers wrong? Because I kind of feel like we're on the right path and we're moving fast.
Well, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, for the first time in the history of the Rasmussen poll, 50% of the country said we were on the right track. But look, this is a work in progress. I always tell people, you have to think of it as a motion picture, not a Polaroid snapshot. We're in the middle of turmoil. We're in the middle of very deep, dramatic change. We're in the middle of trying to solve the Middle East and to solve Ukraine. There are a lot of things going on. But if you watch, and this just happened in the last 24 hours, they passed a rescission bill, which would have been impossible under any president except Trump. They're going to come back with more. They're going to cut spending. They're going to move towards a balanced budget. They're going to have a better economy. But These are big changes. They don't, and I think the question is not how well is he going to do this summer. The question is, by the time we get to August, September of 2026, people are going to say one of two things. It's working, in which case they're going to elect Republicans, or it's not working, in which case they might elect Mondami Marxists and socialists. Now, I think the Democrats are making it harder for them to make a comeback because, frankly, they're so addicted to truly weird ideas. And I think that all makes it, people look at that stuff and they think, you're not us. You don't represent America.
Page 38 to 39, you just list the number of oddball ideas that Democrats have and how badly they poll. I would think every candidate and every campaign consultant should read that. But I quoted you yesterday to former and I hope future Senator Scott Brown when I told him you wrote in Trump's triumph, a dollar raised in 2025 is worth $5 raised in 2026. And I'm going to repeat that to every candidate who comes on the program for the next year and a half. Why is a dollar raised in 2025 5 times as valuable as one raised in 2026?
Because the closer you get to the election, the more people interpret things as politics. The earlier you get your message out, the more likely they are to believe that it's real, the more likely they are to accept it without partisan bias. And the trick here, and this is what Roosevelt was Reagan was brilliant, Trump, frankly, is pretty darn brilliant. The trick is to shape the environment so it's easier to believe your side and harder to believe their side. And you shape the environment early. One of my big projects now is to reestablish the authenticity of a balanced budget because it changes all the equations if the country decides we're really going to balance the budget. And you suddenly have a radically better long-term economic outlook. That has all sorts of psychological effects. Well, the time to establish that is 25, not September and October of 26.
Okay, one last question. I got to go into the break and keep you for 2 more minutes because it's so important. I want the audience to understand the speaker was the first one ever to turn tables on the national media in a debate in 2012 with John King, and he is recognized for the first time. I've always believed this, but something about Trump's genius and the rallies that I just want to get on the record with him for 2 minutes during the break. So go listen to the full interview over at YouTube. Trump's Triumph by Newt Gingrich, must-have book. Go and get it. I'll be right back, America.
The Hugh Hewitt Show is now available on TV. Go to SalemNewsChannel.com or download the app. You can also watch on Roku and Fire Stick. Salem News Channel, the antidote to the mainstream media.
A quick exit with Mr. Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House of Representatives. In his brand new book, Trump's Triumph, on page 33, he writes, part of Trump's genius is his ability to use huge rally as focus groups. I've always thought of them as a feedback loop. Can you expand on that? Because I do believe that is the secret sauce.
Look, I think he, very much like Abraham Lincoln or FDR, he's able to watch the reaction of the audience, and he's able to intuit what works, what doesn't work. And sometimes the audience suddenly shows up with something he never thought about, in which case he listens to him and he decides he's going to do what they're telling him to do. I mean, Lincoln once said, with public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without public sentiment, nothing can succeed. Donald J. Trump understands that. He is, I think, a brilliant leader of public opinion. He's also a brilliant follower of public opinion.
Well, Mr. Speaker, thank you again for Trump's Triumph. Congrats. I think it's book 45. Am I right about that? Book number 45?
I think so. That's about right. That's close enough.
Well, congratulations. Safe travels to Switzerland. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you. Take care.
I want you to know that many hundreds of you have stepped up with donations for our help drive for our friends in Texas who have been so devastated by the natural disaster there. There's a banner at the top of HughHewitt.com. It just says, Help Texas. And lots of you are stepping up to do that with $50, $100, $250, $1,000 donation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The devastation is immense. I continue to hear stories every day, not 6 degrees of separation, not 5, not 4, not 3, but 2 degrees of separation and some 1 degree of separation. People who lost friends and family in the flood and of people who have been wiped out. And there aren't enough Mattress Macs in the world, though. God bless him. There are some wonderful people and all sorts of organizations. You can trust Food for the Poor. They have opened up the warehouse in San Antonio. They are rushing the supplies there for all the people who are dispossessed of everything, who need the basics, who need just, you think, toiletries and underwear, stuff like that. That's what Food for the Poor specializes in when they are working in the United States. Not often, but they were close, they were available, and they can raise money very quickly when they sponsor a campaign like this one. So it asks you to go to that website, hughhewitt.com, wait for the Help Texas banner to post at the top, and then be as generous as possible. You can also text my name, Hewitt, Hewitt, to 51555. That's Hewitt. Text it to 51555, and they'll send you a link, and you can donate that way as well. Or you can just call in old-fashioned 855-359-4673. I'm joined now by Senator Steve Daines of Montana. Hello, Senator. How are you?
Doing great, Hugh. How are you?
I'm ecstatic because you killed off funding for NPR and PBS. And I should note, I worked for PBS for 10 years, but it wasn't crazy then. NPR's always been crazy. Congratulations. How'd you pull it off?
Look, a credit to the Republican Senate team that held together last night, negotiating through a few little twists and turns, but we got it done. Very important. It's what we've done here in the U.S. Senate and in Congress now over the course of the last couple of weeks. You know, passing the one big, beautiful bill, followed by another spending cut package. This is good news for the American people. And Hugh, you know, the more you dig into what we cut and to push back on the lies, what we were hearing last night on the floor of the U.S. Senate, if you were to hear the Senate, the Democrats speaking last night, you think that NPR and PBS will be shut down. Hardly. You know, we cut 1% of the funding for NPR comes from the federal government. It's still 99% supported by private entities. And if you heard the Democrats, they think the world's going to collapse after what happened last night. But it was important we push back. You look at what's going on in NPR, you know, promoting leftist propaganda, as well as in PBS. 85% of their funding, by the way, comes from, well, whether it's corporations or private donations. There's 15% federal. It was very important that we sent a strong message by cutting funding, because if you want to change behaviors, you go to the purse strings, and that's what we did last night.
You know, Senator Daines, in my decade with PBS, LA's KCET and national PBS, I did so many fundraising drives. You had to work all night begging. I call them begathons. And if you work for PBS, you get used to it. They're not going to go out of business. They lost their audience. They lost half of the country by going left, 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 left. And I think this move by you and your team is not unlike President Trump moving our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Highly symbolic. Maybe not that much money overall, but highly symbolic of seriousness. Do you think you follow it up in the budgeting round coming up?
Well, we need to, but Hugh, I think it sends a strong message. Yes, symbolic, but it's more than that, because you're actually seeing a result of reducing funding. But what needs to happen is, you know, Hugh, you think about corporations that are supporting some, you know, PBS, NPR. The message needs to go to them as well, their purse strings, and say, look, like we're seeing right now in corporate America, they're starting to dismantle their DEI programs and their woke agendas to bring it back to original mission, which is looking out for shareholders and doing the right thing for their businesses, and not placating the radical left. And so I hope that they'll follow through by what we did with our cuts in the federal side, that they should also tell PBS and NPR, please depoliticize, move this thing back the middle, be providing information, not editorial comments of what's going on in the world, and worse than that, promoting a left agenda.
Now, one of the objections to doing that particular cut was that the Native Americans on tribal lands would somehow be cut off from the world. I thought that was stupid to begin with, but you're from Montana. You've got some big reservations there. What was your thought on that when that argument arose that you're going to cut off lots of Native Americans from broadcast?
Well, look, I'm sympathetic first and foremost to what's going on in Indian country. It's lots of poverty, lots of problems, rampant in drugs because of Mexican cartels, horrible management by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The federal government is doing, has sold Indian country short. But I mean, it was almost laughable to think that somehow every day My great friends in Indian country are waking up listening to NPR and other sources for primary information. That's not happening. I mean, everybody's going to the, a lot of it's coming through the phones and so forth as well. It's not coming through NPR. They're not like listening for, oh my word, if there's going to be a tornado, we're going to turn on NPR and find out what's going on. It's almost laughable, Hugh, to be honest.
It is laughable. I'm glad you laughed about it. Last question, Senator Daines. Momentum. Momentum cannot be squandered. You have momentum. You passed the one big beautiful bill. Will there be another reconciliation? Will there be regular order for the appropriations process?
Let me answer the first part, and then we'll talk about regular order. In terms of reconciliation, we've had unified government as Republicans 5 times in 90 years. House, Senate, White House. That is when you can move forward with the reconciliation, which allows us to do tax policy and spending policy on the mandatory side with simply 51 votes and not 60 votes, which means it's a red jersey exercise. 5 times in 90 years. Generally, you only get 2 years when you have this opportunity, because usually by the midterm, things shift. It's exactly what happened in 17-18 when Trump had it the first time. We lost the House majority in 18. This is a incredible opportunity. We've got to keep pushing for it. There's more tax policy, indexing capital gains to be one. We go after additional cuts in mandatory spending that we can get 51 votes for. So we should move forward with at least 2 more reconciliation bills. We can do one this year left and next year as well. Regarding appropriations, look, I think it's going to be really tough to get to 60 votes right now with the Democrats. They're not in the mood to cooperate. The well is just about poison at the moment. They are in no mood to help us. I think they want to challenge President Trump perhaps to a shutdown. I hope that's not the case, but I can see the writing on the wall. Having spent a lot of time watching from the inside, I think they're gonna dare the president. I think it's going to be the
I think you're going to be up to it. I think you're going to be up to it. Senator Daines, thank you for joining me.
You bet.
As we head into the close, let me do a market update for you. Brought to you by our friends at AmericanFederal.com. That's where you go to buy or sell gold. Usually buy gold. People are buying gold a lot more. Gold prices have shot up because demand for the real thing, the metal that lasts, the metal that has kept pace with inflation for more than 100 years. Gold today is trading at $3,345 an ounce, off about $15. The key thing to do is call up Nick Rovich and his team at AmericanFederal.com, 1-800-221-7694. That's 1-800-221-7694. Say to them, how do I get on a decent plan for buying gold? Here's what I'd like to invest. Here's how I'd like to invest it safely. I've heard about dollar cost averaging from Hugh. I don't want to put it all in at one time. Can we do this once a month? Should we do it 3 times a year? Should we do it twice a year, once a year? They'll ask how much you want to spend and what kind of diversification you want. You can trust Nick and his team. They're pros. They've been doing it forever. That's who I buy my physical gold from. And I take my physical gold and I put it in a safety deposit box, because you're a knucklehead if you leave it at home. So talk to Nick Rovich and his team, 800-221-7694. Today, as we go into the close, the Dow's up 0.5%. The S&P 500 is up almost 1/3 of a point, and the NASDAQ is up 0.25. The headline at the Wall Street Journal at this hour, very simply, NASDAQ S&P track to close at new highs. The Trump economy is kicking in. The tariffs have been socialized. They have not created inflation. They've created a boom, and the boom is beginning, and people want to have their money working for them. Some of it ought to be in precious metals. Some of it ought to be in dirt. If you want to get into the gold business, do it with Nick Rovich and his team at AmericanFederal.com, 1-800-221-7694. Let me also tell you about AndrewandTodd.com. AndrewandTodd.com do loans, home loans. They're with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend you money to buy your house. Moreover, they're a soup to nuts company. You call them up, 888-1172, and you tell them where you want to buy a house, and then they begin. How much money do you make? How much money are you going to get out of the house you're selling, or how much have you accumulated for a down payment? What's your earning income? What's your potential? Let's look up your credit. Let's figure out how to fix your credit and get it better. And let's go after that house. And do not worry about what the interest rate is. They might go up. They might go down. I think they're going to go down fairly regularly, in which case you will simply refinance and refinance and refinance. But if they go up, you've locked in at 6.5 or whatever it is, and you won't have to worry about it going up. And if they go down, you simply refinance with andrewandtodd.com. If you're a veteran, you don't want to put any money down, 888-888-1172. If you're a first-time home buyer, you want to use an FHA program, 888-888-1172. If you're a senior citizen, 62 or over, living in your own principal residence, call them, 888-888-1172, and talk to them about a reverse mortgage. They're the very best in the business. They've done thousands of loans, including mine when I moved from California back to the Beltway. You can trust Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakin, and Sierra Pacific Mortgage. If you were watching yesterday, Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma joined me for part one of an interview that we were doing about his brand new book, Turnaround, which is available at Amazon.com now and in good bookstores. He's back, and he's able to talk to me about the book at length now because he threw a new rule of the Senate at me yesterday. Explain to the audience why we had to be gentle about talking about the book yesterday. He said they might have thought I didn't like it, and I loved it.
No, I'm actually yesterday was in federal property. I was inside the Capitol actually having a meeting during a vote series, and I cannot do any kind of promotion for a product while I'm inside the federal building in federal space. That makes sense to everyone. I follow all the rules because I happen to be the chairman of the ethics committee, so I think it's a good idea to go ahead and follow all the rules and do it right.
I'm so glad you could explain it to people because I want them to know. I really love this book, but I couldn't say it as much as I wanted to. Kind of a sly book. It's sly because the bottom line is don't be a jerk. Try and be a community builder and try and be good at what you do, but keeping in mind the gospel. Let me begin, though, with the pecan in the blower because I love that story and I'm going to use it forever. I have one similar in my life. Tell people about the pecan in the blower.
Well, my daughter's car, which was an older Nissan Versa that she had, it was her first car that had lots of just random problems as first cars do, but she loved it, named it Chandler. But one of the problems that it had is that it had a little clicking sound when you turned on the air conditioner, which wasn't bad. You just couldn't turn it on high. It was terrible then. But then it became a problem that even on low speeds, it just clicked terribly. And so I did what every shade tree dad mechanic would do. I looked up online to try to figure out how to get into the blower motor in her car. I'm laying backwards in the passenger seat, upside down, head in the floorboard, sticking my arm in between the dashboard area. I reach in, could feel the blower, pull it out, and when I pull the blower motor out, it has an entire pecan inside the blower motor. And I just started laughing. I thought that's got to be the greatest squirrel hiding job ever. I have no idea how an entire pecan got in there. But the storyline that goes with it is sometimes there are little things that just annoy us for a long time that's solvable, but we just choose not to do it. We just put up with it. And in culture and in politics and in our neighborhood and sometimes in our family, there's a little problem, a little something that if we took some time to be able to solve it, we could solve it. We just sit back and just ignore it, and it just doesn't get any better. So a lot of this book is my challenge to say, if you're voting, great. That's a good thing to vote, but voting doesn't solve all the issues in the nation. It solves some, but Washington doesn't change the country. The country changes Washington, and the country is changed by individuals that choose to be able to live their faith, live their values, engage with their community. They don't just sit back and say, stinks to be them. I'm going to be me. They're going to be them, and watch the neighborhood burn down around you. You actually find practical ways to be able to engage. And so I tell a lot of stories from American history, from my own life, from other areas, to be able to walk through and say, here are practical ways. If we're going to have a real turnaround in the nation, it's bigger than just a vote. It's actually determining what am I going to do and how can I actually engage.
What I took away from the pecan in the blower is that the problem had been a problem for 4 years, and it took you 2 hours to fix it, and then her car was usable. By the way, was this Hannah? Is it Hannah's
no,
car?
This is Jordan. This is our youngest, okay. Jordan. Yep.
Okay. Well, Hannah is my favorite because she sat next to the Constitution over at the archives when you were a freshman just coming in. And she kept looking over it and saying, it's right there. It's right there. Does she still have that love of the document and of the system?
She still has that awe of the Constitution, Declaration of Independence. As we sat in after literally brand new member of Congress, we're having our orientation time, and we have a dinner sitting in the rotunda in the National Archives right in the middle of the primary documents for us. And my 10-year-old at that time, Hannah, just kept pointing to the Constitution over and over and over again, saying, "Dad, it's right there." She had such reverential awe to be able to look up and go, that's where the whole country started, was that document right there. And I just kept saying to her, "Yep, that's it, and we've got a responsibility to protect it."
Now, Turnaround is the second book I have read in a month after not reading one for a long time that mentioned the sirens from Odysseus, otherwise known as Ulysses, for the Steelers fans. Oh, by the way, you're a Steelers fan. I'm
I
really
am.
shocked to find out you were a Steelers fan. We might have embargoed you from this show years ago. I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, so we don't know. How does an Oklahoma kid become a Steelers fan?
Well, I actually grew up in a small town south of Oklahoma called Dallas. And at the time I grew up, I was just rebellious enough that everybody was obviously a Dallas Cowboy Roger Staubach fan, and everybody in the front yard was trying to throw like Roger Staubach. And I just determined I wanted to be able to throw like Terry Bradshaw. So everybody else was adoring over the Cowboys. I was tracking Franco Harris and Lynn Swan and Terry Bradshaw and the Steel Curtain.
You got to look up Turkey Joe Jones turning Terry Bradshaw in his head sometime. But in any event, let's go back to the idea that government cannot change culture, but everyone who's listening right now can change the culture around them. There are a bunch of stories here that I want to go through to illustrate this, and I want to begin with the Chuck Wagon Diner because I think I want to be a member of the round table at the Chuck Wagon Diner. Would you explain that to people?
Yeah, I do. In Little Sperry, Oklahoma, just north of Tulsa, there is the Chuck Wagon Diner there where folks get together and have good breakfast and lunch typically, but in a kind of a corner space off on the side, that what they call the round table, but it's actually a big oval table. A group of older men just gather around there for breakfast all the time. Most of them retired, and they just tease each other and tell jokes and catch up with their family all the time. But what's funny about the group is they always find quiet ways to identify what's broken in the city, whether it be at the fire department or at city hall or something else that's going on. As they're driving around, they'll figure out some widow, somebody, and they would determine we're going to quietly go fix that. So this group of older men got together not just to be able to gossip and talk and catch up and just hang out. They got together for a strategic reason. They encouraged each other, but also determined what are we going to do to be able to make Sperry better today. And they just quietly went and did it. And folks don't know the Chuck Wagon Diner, and folks don't know the guys around the round table, but they made a real difference in that town. And I thought, this is not hard. This was a group of guys that were retired that determined I'm not going to just sit back and be retired. I'm going to still invest in what's happening in my town after me.
After that, I want to talk about Lester Shaw because it's a different example, different circumstance, different challenge, but my goodness, what a difference this man made.
Yeah, Dr. Lester Shaw is a teacher at Booker T. Washington High School in Tulsa, North Tulsa. And years ago, he went to a conference, and in the conference, they were teaching on pockets of poverty and talking about what do you do to be able to help people in pockets of poverty. And he actually asked the question, aren't there pockets of hope out there somewhere? And the lecturer just kind of shrugged on it, and he just couldn't shake that thought. And so this teacher educator, he's got a busy life already, determined, I'm going to get 2 or 3 students together after school, and I'm just going to mentor them and try to be able to help them. I'm going to find a little pocket of hope that I'm going to create. Well, that now is called Pockets Full of Hope. Now for a couple of decades, he and his wife Brenda have done that. They've literally mentored kids in an area where the graduation rate's not very high, but in their program and their mentorship, they've had 100% graduation rate out of high school, just mentoring kids, just engaging. They brought back who they call the pocket players. These are former students that are there that are now in jobs and occupations literally all over the country now because they gave them a vision that they could serve and do anything. A lot of those folks come back and volunteer time as those pocket players and help just mentor a next generation. Dr. Shaw, not a perfect man. He would never say that he was, but he's just a guy that determines something needs to be done, and that's me. Quite frankly, I give the illustration of Nehemiah chapter 1 from the Bible. It's a 2,500-year-old story about Nehemiah and his brother Hanani. Hanani notices Jerusalem's all falling apart and is collapsing and walks away and kind of says, stinks to be them. Nehemiah drops to his knees and says, okay, God, this is really a problem. What can I do about it? And I really define a lot of people in our culture, even people that are politically engaged, as either Hananiahs or Nehemiahs, those that just complain about the problem, yell at the TV, or those that actually say to God, God, okay, what's my part? How do I actually help make this better?
You know, it's been since 1992 when I heard a sermon series preached on Nehemiah, and I had forgotten until I read Turnaround that he told everyone, start with the wall behind your house. And so don't design the whole wall for everyone, just build the wall behind your house. There's a lot of that in this book, and I was wondering, I know this is a book intended for a political audience, but it's also, I think, very adaptable to people who are in small groups and Bible studies, who don't read scripture all the time, often read different books. Was that part of your intended audience, Senator Langford?
Hugh, it absolutely was. I really think this book, well, I don't think I know because I wrote it. I designed it to be a book that you actually have conversation about, that you would read the chapter, maybe a friend of yours or a small group would get together, they're all reading it, read a chapter, and then get a chance to be able to discuss it because it's designed to say, okay, what are each of us doing? What do we do with this? Is this actually true in our lives and in our group? And then what can we individually do and what can we do as a group to be able to take on some of the challenges? I try to take leadership off the top of the shelf. I don't think leadership was ever designed to be on the top of the shelf and no one could get there. It's not a title. It's not a certain family name. Leadership is ultimately, I saw a problem. I asked somebody to help me go solve it together. I'm a leader. It's just that simple.
I will be right
You don't have
back
to have a
with
certain
Senator
title.
Langford during the break. The book is Turnaround. You can go order it and make sure your small group puts it on their list. You know, Senator Langford, Clarence Hill Jr. hates ethnical social distancing. After you mentioned him in your book, I went and looked him up, and that's what he wars against. And your Sunday supper approach that you and Senator Scott, my wife and I have embraced that, by the way. I think it's a great movement. Do you think that's spreading? Is that actually working out there beyond the headlines?
I think it's spreading. I think it's one of those easy ideas that people can say, well, I could do that. I could try it. And it really started with just watching some of the racial violence at different moments and me saying to my staff, we're not going to be able to solve everything on race relations in America, but we can do something. And so I just started asking people, have you ever had a family of another race in your home for dinner? And most of the time, no matter which race I was talking to, most of the time people would answer with, I have friends of another race. And I would just smile at them and say, that's not what I asked. Has your family ever invited a family of another race to your home for dinner so that your kids see kids of another race around the dinner table, having normal conversation, interacting, so that generationally we can make the shift? There's a difference between friendly and friends, but there also, it seems to be a barrier in the threshold of a lot of our homes that we never get past a person of another race, especially of a family of another race in our home, just having normal conversation relationships. So our nation's come a very long way on the issue of race relations, and I talk about that in the book. But I still think we have work to be able to do, and I think it's helpful for parents and grandparents to be able to show the next generation. We have friends in relationships. We may have differences of opinion. This may be a next door neighbor or something else. We may disagree on things, but that's my neighbor. That's my friend. And we can still have those deeper relationships on that.
What I appreciated about that part of the book is that you gently told people we're not talking about two churches having a gathering together at one of the churches and they happen to be racially mixed. That's being friendly. It's not being a friend. I think that's a
Right.
crucial distinction. So how does that spread? Where did this spread? Has that picked up momentum?
It has picked up momentum. I've talked about Clarence Hill, my friend in Oklahoma City, that is a pastor, that he is doing this with his congregation, with groups, and is actually helping lead this in multiple areas. I've done this for years as well. Multiple other folks have. We continue to be able to lay that idea out. And what's really funny to me, Hugh, is the number of people say, well, that's overly simplistic. And I'll just smile at them typically and say, well, try it. Have you ever done it? Once you try that, and what happens is for many people, for a moment, they have to click and decide, who am I going to invite? If you have a moment when you realize I don't know somebody, a family of another race I can invite over, that's the first signal you are friendly with folks, but haven't developed friendships across races. Because if you don't even know somebody, it wouldn't be awkward to even invite over for dinner. That may be the first step developing that relationship. So to me, it's just a gentle nudge. Again, we're not solving everything on this, but I want to be able to make progress that each part of every generation gets better on this so this doesn't become an issue for us long term, that we're actually solving. And I understand a lot of people love to be able to celebrate racial differences and those things. That is totally up to them. But I want to make sure there's not barriers that we create in different areas that are just there because of lack of relationship.
Perfectly said. Talking with Senator James Langford about his brand new book, Turnaround. It's about what the country can do and how one turns around the country. It is designed for small groups. It is designed for readers. It's really well written. I'm tempted to talk to you about the cloakroom conversation about the portal and conference realignment, because that's when the last time I showed up at the RNC conference, we spent an hour and a half. Poor Shelley Moore Capito and Susan Collins listening to 30 men talking about football, and they put up with it. But let's go instead to chapter 10. Every few years, a friend of mine gets tagged. John Kyle was a good friend of mine, and Marco Rubio, a good acquaintance, and then you get tagged with trying to do immigration, and it always blows up. And if you kept grudges, you'd have a lot of grudges to keep, maybe against me, because I was against your bill too. But tell me how that came to be and what you learned from it, and what are we going to do about it? Because it's a problem that remains to be fixed.
It does actually. So a year and a half ago, I was the ranking member of the Border Management Committee, and we had a problem. We had a president with an open border, and there seemed to be no way to be able to stop him from just keeping the border open. We got to a moment that we determined as a conference, we're going to cut off funds to Ukraine. We're going to cut off funds even to Israel at that point if we don't get this president to be able to do a border bill. And so he came to the table, agreed, yep, we're going to do that. And we started the process on this. That was a 4-month negotiation to see how far I could move a president that was dedicated to open borders to try to find a way to be able to close it. And now I'm working with the Democrat president, with the Democrat Senate. Obviously, I'm not going to get everything I wanted, but we made significant changes in what would be the statute, trying to be able to not only do enforcement for people beyond the border. We took very difficult rules at the end of the process and moved them to the beginning of the process. So if people crossed the border, they would be arrested, they would be quickly screened, and they'd be deported within days to hours. It was a dramatic shift to be able to put in law, and it also closed some of the loopholes dealing with the asylum process that had been a nemesis of the last 4 presidents to be able to do. Now, again, there were lots of areas we didn't get to touch. The House had done a great bill called HR2 that was much broader, covered a lot of other things, but they couldn't even get every Republican to vote for that, much less a Democrat. And in the Senate, I've got to get Republicans and Democrats to be able to vote for it. So it's my hope to be able to stop the last million people coming across the border during the Biden administration, hoping for a Trump administration when they would be able to implement it better, but also thinking 5 years from now, there's going to be a different president. I don't know who that's going to be. We want to make sure there are no excuses to ever have an open border ever again. So obviously that didn't pass. There's a lot of politics and a lot of things there, and a lot of folks wanted more, and so did I. But I would say I thought it was a good start. It really blew up a lot over social media stuff. And so I spent a chapter in the book just saying, how can we deal with social media issues and some of the things that are fact or fiction? Some things are fact, but some things are fiction, but they just get repeated so often on social media. How do we differentiate between the two? It is a big cultural issue as a conservative. I know I've got a lot of friends of mine that are conservatives as well, that they'll come and catch me on things that I'll say that and just talk to me about things. I'll say, well, that's just flat out not true. I still have friends of mine that catch me and say the government's got planes that are flying over my house, dropping chemicals on me with the chemtrails. I can look up in the sky and see it, and I've read all about it on social media. I'm like, government's not dropping chemicals on your house. That's not actually true. And I'm sorry, social media is repeating it so often you believe it. We as a culture have got to be able to figure out, how do we separate fact from fiction on social media? And then how do we figure out how to be able to make progress on hard things? Because we have a lot of big, hard things that have been unanswered for decades. We've got to stop complaining. We've got to start at least fixing parts of it and start making some progress.
Now, to take the focus off of immigration, just this week, Senator Booker assaulted a friend of mine, Mike Waltz, accused him of cowardice. Mike's a Green Beret who's been in gunfights with the Taliban. I thought it was wholly inappropriate, but as you note in the book, in D.C., the angrier and more caustic you are, the more people cheer for you and the more press attention you get. Is there any way to discourage attacks like Senator Booker's on people like soon-to-be Ambassador Waltz from happening? I mean, can we change the incentive structure?
That's actually us. And I talk a lot about this, that it's an us issue on that. People will step up and donate to Cory Booker by the thousands and say, way to go, you hit him in the face, you insulted him, you belittled him. That's what I'm looking for. That happens on the left and on the right. And as long as we as Americans look for somebody on social media that's making a social media moment and then go reward them with lots of donations on that to be able to jump in and say, I want you to do more of that, it's going to continue to be able to happen, and will continue to be able to degrade the nation. So we're a free speech country. Anybody can say whatever they want to say, especially political speech. You can speak it out, but Americans have to be able to choose what they affirm. If they're going to affirm how we actually solve the problems, or we're going to affirm people that just yell about the problem.
Now, Senator, you said there are three buckets when you were running the camp. You got to teach kids what they need to know, doctrine. You got to teach them what they want to be, that is a character choice, and then what to do, habits. How do you get the habits of the Senate to change? I know people like Chris Coons are your friends, but there are habits that are now ingrained and getting deeper where you raise money this way. I don't know how you change that or how we change that. I'm in the business of not being boring, right? So I don't want to be boring, but I also don't want to be a bomb thrower. How do we change this?
Right. Yeah, I think there's going to have to be some rule changes in the Senate. Some folks that have been there for a long, long time that have said over and over, well, they can things can be different because they used to be different. I smile at them and say, well, that things are going to have a rule change on some of these things to be able to make sure that we actually structure ourselves to make sure that we're doing things wise and well, whether that be appropriations, the budget process, so many things. There's some broken systems and structures there we've got to be able to fix, and I think we can, and I think we should. And it's not a partisan issue on this. It's that if we're going to be the Senate and we're going to be the world's greatest deliberative body again, let's reset the rules to be able to make sure that we actually can fight it out, argue on the issues that need to be argued, solve the problem, move on to the next one.
Last comment, Senator. You quote Lincoln. I know a little bit about Lincoln. I've never seen this before. Do I not destroy enemies when I make them my friends? Classic Lincoln. Beautiful. Does anyone believe that in the Senate? Do I not destroy enemies when I make them my friends?
Yeah, there are folks that actually do try to engage to be able to solve the problem. That believe you don't have to belittle another person to be able to actually win the argument. I've just noticed for me personally, anyone who comes and yells and screams and cusses me out doesn't persuade me. I've never had a person cuss me out, and at the end of it, I thought, you're so smart, I should be like you. That just doesn't happen. And especially with the 99 other stubborn people that I work with, they're as stubborn as I am. They don't get moved by somebody yelling and screaming at them. It just makes you dig in. So at the end of the day, we've got to get back to actually looking at each other, talking to each other, and saying, you and I disagree on things. You mentioned my friend Chris Coons. He is a real friend. He is somebody that we check on each other all the time. Our wives know each other. They're friends as well. He votes wrong all the time, but he is my friend. And he would say the same thing about me on that as well. But we can have serious, hard conversations about things. And I think that's the expectation of the Senate. It's not for me to go cave on my principles. I'm a conservative. I believe I'm right. And these principles help people in every community, every place, every race, every background in the country. That's why I believe in these principles. But I want to be able to move a set of ideas that actually persuade other people to take it on. And I'm not going to get that by being the angriest elf yelling at people. It's going to be a matter of I'm going to actually try to step in and actually move a set of ideas.
Turnaround is a great place to start for anyone who's listening. If I had more time, I think I could persuade Senator Langford that if Darius Garland had not hurt his foot, the Oklahoma Thunder would not, in fact, be the NBA champions because it was too easy to beat the Pacers, but that's for another day. Senator Jim Langford, thank you for joining me. Turnaround available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and bookstores everywhere. Thank you, Senator Langford. The American Legislative Exchange Council is one of our great sponsors, and they are gathered in Indianapolis. They could have gone to Ohio. I don't know why they didn't go to Ohio, but Jonathan Williams, their CEO and chief economist, is there. Why Indianapolis, John?
Hey, you welcome from Indy. We have 1,500 of our closest conservative friends here. Record ALEC attendance in recent years. Wish you were here, but we'll get you next time.
Well, what is the main agenda item in this gathering of the American Legislative Exchange Council? By the way, you can go to alec.org, alec.org/U if you want to get a State of the State newsletter. What's the main agenda, John?
Well, there's a lot. That we'll be having Governor Braun here tomorrow morning to talk about Indiana's future and his ideas as the new governor. We had Vivek Ramaswamy just a few minutes ago here speaking. We got a great Ohio turnout, so it kind of does feel like we're in Ohio, Hugh. As tough as a Michigander to say that, we've had some really good Ohio leadership here, and the flat tax was talked about at 2.75, of course, that they just got done with Senate President McCauley on our board. So we're talking about a wide range of issues. We're considering more than 60 pieces of model legislation here this week that our different task forces are debating right now, and our legislators will give final approval on coming out of this meeting. So just a great week, robust conversations, and record attendance and enthusiasm for conservative solutions here, Hugh.
What did future Governor Ramaswamy talk to you folks about?
Well, he had a great message on his idea to take the flat tax victory that was just achieved in Ohio and take it further and get to what I think is the right flat tax, and that's 0% flat tax. And that's was his goal, talking about that to make Ohio a powerhouse of the Midwest again. I mean, Indiana has been beating Ohio and Michigan for a long time when it comes to rich states, poor states, and being number 3 in economic outlook. I think he realizes that, and it's a major competition, and he wants to make sure Ohio wins it.
Now, John, last week the One Big Beautiful Bill passed, and I don't quite understand the provision yet about school choice, but Senator Cruz on the floor of the Senate said $1,700 to qualifying individuals who deduct, I think this begins in 2027, maybe 2026, for states that are eligible. Do you have any idea which states are eligible?
Well, it's a great question. And really, the theme of yesterday was education reform here, Hugh. We had Secretary Linda McMahon on the main stage keynoting our lunch. And in conversations with her, this is a topic of conversation of legislators asking about that very question about how do we opt in. And I know they're still working with Treasury on rolling out the implementation and the regs on that. But states essentially can raise their hand and say, we want to be a part of it. I think that was part of the compromise, if you remember, giving a couple of hesitant Republican senators to vote for a package that would have automatically opted in all states under the original legislation, the ECCA, that our good friend Virginia Fox has been spearheading in the House for many years. And so that was a little bit of a casualty of compromise, but I still think it's got a great opportunity for states to work to opt in at this point, and just working out the details on what that's going to look like.
Yeah. Do you have any idea what the opt-in is? That's the part I don't understand. What do they have to do to opt in? Because I want to write that check. I'll write that check to any scholarship granting institute. Tax credits are a powerful, powerful thing. As an economist, you know that, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a major victory. And in fact, it's part of the school choice revolution that swept the states, passing it at the state level. They're now all the education savings account approaches. We've seen scholarship tax credits. We had our senator from Idaho, our state chair for ALEC, on the main stage at a panel discussion talking about that being Idaho's approach this year to join this education freedom revolution. And so I think, essentially, from my understanding of it, this is early on, obviously, as part of the implementation, Hugh, is that you would have to authorize to make sure you have scholarship granting entities allowed to operate in your state. That's a cursory understanding of it from my perspective.
Okay, so that's you're on day 4. When do you wrap up the ALEC convention? Is it done tomorrow, or do you go through Sunday?
Tomorrow, yes, we'll wrap up with Governor Braun with a great discussion, breakfast, and then we're going to hear from U.S. Senator Jim Banks, a former ALEC chair here in Indiana. So that's going to be a great wrap to the week, but it's been a phenomenal record-setting week here.
Did you get the Policy and Procedures Task Force off to a good start?
We have 2 new task forces, as you know, that this is their first official meeting, and the Process and Procedures Task Force, with that really essential discussion around election integrity, is kicked off tomorrow. And so we're really excited and looking forward to that. The one that we did kick off today, Hugh, for its very first meeting, is our Veterans and Military Affairs Task Force. And so Lisa Nelson, our CEO, and I were there with our board chair, and it was a full room and so many veterans from different branches there talking about these key issues. So that was an exciting day today. It's going to be an exciting day tomorrow, launching that Process and Procedures Task Force as well.
I look forward to a debrief next week. Go to ALEC.org, American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC.org/Hugh, and find out what they did this week and what they're going to be doing all of this year and next. Josh Kraushaar is editor-in-chief of the Jewish Insider. I've been looking at the Times of Israel, Josh. It looks like things are heating up between Israel and Syria beyond the exchange yesterday. What's your understanding of that situation and Mr. Jelani?
Well, the surprise for me and for a lot of our reporters is that Prime Minister Netanyahu just came back from Washington, where it seemed like he moved his position on Syria and Jelani much closer to where Trump has been. And the White House removed sanctions against the new Syrian government. And there was talk after the visit that Syria could be the next country, not just in dealing with more diplomatic relations, but also maybe joining the Abraham Accords. And then yesterday we heard that Israel not only was bombing southern Syria to protect the Druze populations who were dealing with violence and attacks, but also Damascus, and then near the capital, they're near the president's residence. So there is an escalation. It doesn't seem like there's going to be any real normalization of relations between Israel and Syria anytime soon. And there's a lot of confusion on what Israel's end game, I mean, beyond protecting the Druze population. And I think it's a very really legitimate humanitarian goal. But from a geostrategic standpoint, there's a lot of questions and a lot more questions than answers.
I listened to Aviv Redig-Gur talk today on a podcast with an Israeli Druze, and I figured out there are 700,000 Druze in Syria, about 200,000 Druze in Lebanon, about 150,000 Druze in Israel. And the Druze try to get along with whoever they are. Do you expect that as the United States protected the Kurds for 10 long years under Saddam, Israel might end up protecting the Druze for as long as it takes?
I think, Hugh, that's a very appropriate analogy. There's a lot of concern. I mean, there's a lot of concern about what Turkey's expanded role and kind of having an influence within the Syrian government, what their end game is with the Kurds in the northeast of the country, and there's a lot of concern about the safety and security of the Druze population in the south of the country. There's been a lot of commentary in Israel that, especially after the Israeli success in deterring Iran, defeating Iran in the 12-day war, that Israel is really as much of a regional power as they've ever been, and they want to make sort of clear and sure that the neighborhood is safe. And the Druze, by the way, Hugh, are among the most patriotic and loyal Israelis. They serve disproportionately in the IDF and the Israeli army, and I think that really is an important factor in Israel's defense against the Druze population in Syria on the southern border as well.
Now that's on the north. In the south, in Gaza, one of the few Christian, if not the only Christian churches in Gaza, was hit by a shell. Is that Israel's fault? Is Israel investigating?
Well, the president raised the concern about that, and the prime minister quickly responded and called for an investigation. So he said he regretted the strike. It is, probing it and doing an investigation, but clearly the prime minister treasures the very close relationship in recent weeks with President Trump. And when Trump says he's concerned about something, I think the prime minister has realized he needs to respond quickly.
And last question, Josh. Is this government going to fall? Because it sounds like members of the coalition are heading for the exits. And I thought they wanted to get to the 4-month recess so it couldn't fall for 4 months. What's the scoop?
Yeah, we have a story from our reporter Lahav Harkov about the very precarious nature of Netanyahu's coalition, which is teetering because one of the kind of religious parties left the coalition, and a second religious party quit the government, but they didn't pull out all of their lawmakers from the coalition. So the government is still alive, talking to the experts in Israel about the politics, the very volatile internal politics. Very likely, we've talked about this before, Hugh, it's very volatile, but it's likely going to stand until the next elections in 2026. But boy, I mean, there's a lot of divisions within the coalition, and again, the more Netanyahu tries to maybe appeal to Trump and try to move to the center, Gaza, the ceasefire, and the discussions going on there, it also can alienate elements on the right, and that's a hard challenge to balance.
I'm going to have to go read Jewish Insider on that. It's very complicated, very difficult story to understand. Josh Kroshauer, thank you. Follow Josh on X at Josh Kroshauer. Read the Jewish Insider for the latest hot takes from the American point of view on what is going on, not only in Israel, but in the international Jewish community. Thank you, Josh. I want to tell everyone out there, one of our sponsors is Consumer Cellular, and I've made the switch to Consumer Cellular. You ought to call and find out whether it makes sense for you as well. The number is on the screen there on the Salem News Channel. If you take a look down there, 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454. You can also go to consumercellular.com/Hugh. If you call 1-800-411-4454, use my code, Hugh25. You'll get $5 off each of your first 5 bills. But what they'll help you do is figure out what best suits your needs. You can have savings without sacrifice. You can have the best cell phone quality in the world. You can get absolute crystal clear reception. You don't have to pay an arm and a leg. You don't have to support big cellular. You don't have to, in any way, shape, or form, get taken to the cleaners. Maybe you only need 5 gigs a month. Maybe you need only 10 gigs a month. Maybe you need unlimited data. But if you're over 50, Consumer Cellular will give you 2 lines, unlimited data for $60 a month. Can't be beat. Now, how do you do that? You call them. 800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454, or go to consumercellular.com/Hugh. You'll take one button, you'll push one button, listen to the menu, push one button, and within 20 seconds usually, often, but never longer than a minute, you're talking to someone in America who's going to help you walk through. Get your bill out before you do that so you can study it. Finally, don't forget, I'm in the Relief Factor studio. Took it in hour number 1, reminding you in hours 2 and 3. Don't leave home without it. Every morning I take it and every day on the first hour of the show I take it so that in the morning I get my miles in. Only 4 miles today because it's just a little bit too humid for me to really do the 10K. Hopefully that humidity is gone pretty soon. If not, I'll stick to 4 miles a day. But Relief Factor gets me through it, and it will get you through whatever your daily workout routine is. It might be in the gym. You might be one of those crazy people who like to go out and scull and get on the crew. You might be a sailor. You might just be a gym rat. You might be doing Pilates, or you might be on your Peloton, whatever it is. If you're exercising, you've got minor aches and pains, don't mask the pain with Tylenol. Get rid of it with Relief Factor. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. Or go to their website, find the starter pack for $19.95 at relieffactor.com. That's relieffactor.com. I was on Fox News this morning. I just want to tell you what my position is. I don't have time to play the clip. I do not believe that Congressman Comer ought to call former First Lady Jill Biden before the committee. Call everybody else and eventually immunize them so they have to testify. If they invoke the Fifth, you can always do that. DOJ can give them immunity. Then they go before the committee. They have to answer the questions. Because the American people have to know what happened when our president was incompetent. Do not call the former First Lady. The whole idea of dragging our former presidents and First Ladies down, like the FBI did and the Department of Justice did with former President Trump, was unprecedented, led to Donald Trump's resurgence. I've been reading Butler by Selena Zito, very much tracks with the raid on Mar-a-Lago, because we hate it. Americans hate that. Let's not be as dumb as the Democrats were in raiding the residence of former President Trump. Let's respect the office and the participants in the office, which is the President and the First Lady. I really hope they do that. Now, I want to play for you Chuck Grassley in the Judiciary Committee today. Chuck Grassley's been around. He hates stunts. Cut number 5.
Before you disband, I'd like to have everybody that's here know that what happened here today is no different than when Democrats cut off debate on Judge Kashubi and Judge Lee against Republican protests to continue debate in November of 2023. In that markup, Senator Blackburn and others were not offered an opportunity to speak on those nominees, and Chairman Durbin ordered the vote. Just like the obstruction we saw here, I ordered the vote this time. So if you'll spread that word that this is not unprecedented, either the actions of the minority walking away or what we did here as a majority, it's happened before, and we have to move things along. And I thank everybody for participating.
Bravo, Chuck Grassley. Don't let the Democrats get away with their stunts and somehow filibuster email Bo. He needs to go. Let me remind you that we are raising money along with Food for the Poor for the devastated region in Texas, the Hill Country. All you have to do is go to Help Texas. The banner is over at HughHewitt.com. Or you can text my name, Hewitt, H-E-W-I-T-T, to 51555, 51555. Or you can call them the old-fashioned way. Like, let me make sure I get the number right. It's 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. They are still in the grim work of recovering bodies, and people are still missing. but there's also rebuilding going on, clearing going on. Lots of people down there need lots of help, and Food for the Poor is stepping up with your assistance. And lots of you, hundreds of you are stepping up and sending $50, $100, $250, $500, whatever you can afford. We thank you for helping your fellow Americans. Head over to hughhewitt.com, hit the Help Texas banner at the top. And if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, welcome aboard. If you're listening on any of our great affiliates, you should be trying us over at YouTube. You can sign up at YouTube for the Hugh Hewitt Show and watch guests like this. Rich Lowry, editor of National Review, the Wally Pipp of podcasting. Rich, you're a Yankees fan, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So you know that when Wally Pipp sat down and Lou Gehrig stood up, it was a long time till we heard from Wally Pipp. Jack Butler sat in for you last week. I thought he did a fabulous job.
Well, why do you think I came back from vacation, Hugh? I can't leave that seat unoccupied and become the Wally Pipp of podcasting. And Andy actually did his podcast on his own, so I was really rendered relevant.
I also listened to Today, and he was very glad to have you back because he didn't like doing the solo monologue for an hour, and I get that. I want to talk to you first about Mr. Mamdani. Now, Rich, I get confused. Do you live in D.C. or do you live in New York?
I'm in the New York City area.
Okay, so you don't get to vote?
No.
Okay. Here's Mr. Mamdani, a clip that surfaced of him on a podcast today, cut number 1.
My platform is that every single person should have housing. And I think faced with these two options, the system has hundreds of thousands of people unhoused, right? For what? And if there was any system that could guarantee each person housing, whether you call it the abolition of private property or you call it, just a statewide housing guarantee, it is preferable to what is going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
so. Rich Lowry,
people try and play like
how do you hear that?
I mean, it's another indication that at bottom he's a communist, maybe a small c communist or a democratic communist. That's not a contradiction in terms, but it makes you wonder, Hugh, where was the Andrew Cuomo Oppo operation, right? We get one of these on X, like literally every other day, the kind of thing that you think would sink someone. Now, it's not going to sink someone necessarily in New York City Democratic politics, but this could have hurt, these things. And Cuomo didn't find them or didn't utilize them, and is now making this run as an independent. Where I don't think it's totally hopeless, but I'm skeptical.
Well, I am very critical of that because I think the best option for New York is Eric Adams is mediocre, but mediocre is better than crazy. Curtis Sliwa, I've known forever, a good guy, but he can't win. Andrew Cuomo's a bad guy and he can't win. Isn't it really Eric Adams or the communist?
I was talking to a really smart political consultant who knows New York City really well, and he says if you somehow manage to make Mamdani radioactive to Democratic voters, right? That's the name of the game. 70% of the electorate in November is going to be Democrats. If you win 75% of them, he wins, right? Mathematically. So you really have to drive up his negatives among Democrats. And you got to do it on practical stuff. Your streets aren't going to be as safe. You might lose your job. This has all been tried and failed. It's going to make the city worse. And then, once people conclude someone's unacceptable, then it kind of doesn't matter, right? Whoever's in second will surge. But as of now, Adams and Cuomo both have much higher negatives than Mamdani, and I'm not sure anyone's doing the right thing. Cuomo seems to think he just gets out there in glad hands. He'll become likable and surge past him. I don't think that's going to happen. Everyone's fire's got to be on this guy and making him unacceptable. And then if he is unacceptable, then it doesn't really matter whether it's a three-person race against him. Someone will surge. But I don't think the first predicate necessarily is going to happen that is radioactive.
The next question I would love to hear you and Andy talk about is how bad could it get in New York? I moved to New York for the first time in 1980, and I stayed for 8 months, and I left, and I've only been back as a visitor since. It was horrific in 1980. Could it become that bad again?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's still a long way to slide till you get there. I was on the other end of that, Hugh. I came in 92. And Rudy was elected, in 93? And I left to go down in D.C. in 94. But just when I was going, they were rousting people out of the subways. Their announcements don't, give people money. It's not helpful to them. It's bad for the city. It's bad for everyone's safety. The squeegee guys are being run off the street. So you could see it just beginning to change. But when I showed up, people said, don't go on the subway unless it's the middle car where there's a conductor or the front car where there's a conductor, because otherwise it's too dangerous. People still had signs in their cars saying, don't break into my car. The radio's already been stolen, right? That's how bad it was. So I don't think we get there soon, but the trajectory is going to be bad. And this is another indication that, Hugh, sorry to drag on here, of a complacency, right? We got de Blasio because it was so good after Giuliani and Bloomberg, people thought it couldn't go back. And it hasn't gone all the way back, but it's taken steps back, and this will be further steps down if this guy actually makes it.
Now, you have a good police commissioner right now in Ms. Tisch, and you've got a pretty decent school chancellor, but I believe Mamdani can replace them both. Has anyone, to your knowledge, asked him if he'll commit to keeping both or either of them?
I think people have urged him on the police commissioner. I'm not sure whether he's committed. Now, he may, he's sounded more reasonable in these various meetings he's having with elected Democrats and business leaders, kind of kinder, gentler communism. But I think these convictions are quite sincere. And outside of his ideology being wrong and destructive, I just think he's a completely callow guy. Even if he agreed with us on everything, Hugh, I would not elect that guy to run New York City, this massive management and political task.
No, and we don't agree on it. Number one, I think he's an anti-Semite. I think Politico produced all the evidence I need to make that opinion clear for me, and I'm very comfortable saying, if you've got this record of 10 things, even though you haven't said the protocols of the Elder of Zion, they're somewhere in your head rolling around. Do you think the Jewish community figures out that they've got to unite around one candidate?
I don't know. I just I don't know about New York City Jewish Democrats. I'm on. I don't know whether you know Sid Rosenberg, great host on WABC. I'm on with him every week up here, and he's a Jew and a reasonable Jew and a sound guy, loves Trump, loves Israel, and he's turning his head out about this every single show. That his fellow Jews just don't get it, or at least if they get it, they won't actually act on it and pull the lever at the ballot box in a way that makes sense. So I don't have a lot of hope.
Okay, let's go to the bad side. If he actually wins, I want to talk to you quickly about Epstein as well. But if he actually wins, does he become the brand of the Democratic Party? Because I'll work every day to make that happen.
Yeah, I think it'll hurt them. It's already hurting them somewhat, but does that make a difference in a swing district somewhere in Iowa where the Democrat doesn't have to have anything to do with Mamdani, hasn't met him in his life, doesn't have to endorse him, and can distance himself from him? I think it hurts, but it's not going to make a massive difference. I think the Democrats have other problems.
Well, our problem right now on the Republican side is named Epstein, and he's not really a problem. I heard your introduction with Andy today on the McCarthy Report, and like you, I paid very little attention over the last 7 years because he was a criminal and a horrible person, and he was going to spend the rest of his days in jail, so I thought suicide made sense. I also thought the speculation that someone might have helped him kill himself made sense that you and Andy had today. But does this story possibly last on fumes? There's just nothing there.
Mm-hmm. I just think it's a rule of life, Hugh, our political life, the last 10 years, every Trump controversy goes away. I think it's a symptom of how the news cycle has changed and the news business has changed, and everything feels old after about 5 days because the coverage has been so obsessive. And then he's doing so much, right, and has a genius for turning the page. So I do kind of think it fades, but I think elements of his base aren't going to be satisfied no matter what. And I think they botched this. I'd like to see more documents. I think there are legitimate questions about this, some of which will just never be answered. How he made his money, I don't think we'll ever know. But why weren't some other people prosecuted? I think that's a good question. What was this review? How did they undertake it of these documents? Who actually did it? It'd be great to have an AG who could go out and answer all those questions and kind of maybe put this thing to bed to the extent it can be put to bed. But I'm not sure Pam Bondi is that AG.
I worked for 2 attorneys general. They never get into the weeds on a particular criminal case. I wouldn't expect her to know either. But let me conclude with a completely different subject. The guy in Syria, there's been a massacre of the Alawites. There was an atrocity against the Druze. Are you beginning to get your fear up that we've put another Taliban government into place? Because I am.
Yeah, I mean that fear never went away, right? Or it was always there, even though there was some optimism about him. But it's not shocking that a couple months after he takes power, Israel's bombing. And what's disgraceful, besides just the atrocities, is just the fact that it just shows once again, Hugh, a Middle Eastern government can engage in all sorts of massacres and inhumane practices, and no one cares. No one cares unless it's allegedly Israel doing it. Then it's front page news, and podcasters are obsessed over it. It's disgraceful.
Great point. Great point on which to end. Rich Lowry, good to have you back from vacation. Watch out for Wally Pipp, a.k.a. Jack Butler. And I will talk to you again soon. Seth A. Mandel, that's where you find him on X. He is a senior editor at Commentary. He's also part of the Commentary podcast almost every morning. Hello, Seth. How have you been?
I've been good. How have you been, Hugh?
I'm worried because I listened to Haviv Reddy Gurday talk about Jolani in Syria. And I wanted to get your take on that, because it seems to me as though he's got a lot more in common with Osama bin Laden, Zawahiri, Zarqawi, and al-Baghdadi than he does with the Sunni Gulf states. What do you think?
Well, he's definitely, I don't know how much he has in common with them. I know he has a past in common with them, and that's probably bleeding in a bit to, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, not that he's that old, but yes, he comes from that world. It was, they were part of, HTS was part of an Al-Qaeda offshoot. And so he's used to operating in that world. And so are his men. That seems to be the big problem, right? He can put on a tie, and he's been able to at least superficially make the transformation. And I think that he's trying to make the transformation, but he very clearly does not have enough control of his troops, of his administration in general.
Now, the narrative that I got from Haviv today, and he was talking to an Israeli Druze, is that the MO for Jolani is to wait for a conflict in any ethnic enclave, be it the Alawites or the Druze, then bring in the, quote, Syrian national forces, which are Jolani's terrorists, and then they kill everyone in the minority. And that happened in the town in southern Syria, and then the Israelis said, no, Druze are our friends. Now, how much do you follow the Israeli Druze and the IDF and the Druze in Syria question, Seth?
Well, I've been writing about it the past couple of days, so a fair amount.
Closely. So do you expect that the IDF is going to establish for the Druze in southern Syria what the United States established for the Kurds after the first Gulf War? In other words, a safe space.
I think that's what they're doing, but I don't think it's going to be called a safe space specifically for the Druze. Bibi has said repeatedly that it's going to be a demilitarized zone from Damascus to the border. And I don't know if Jolani is as comfortable with that today as he seemed 3 weeks ago, or if he was just biding his time. But Israel has been clear they can't let southern Syria turn into a new South Lebanon. During the Lebanese Civil War, South Lebanon was like a PLO statelet. From Palestinian terrorists were launching attacks and strikes from there into Israel. When the PLO were booted from South Lebanon to Tunisia, Hezbollah came in. And that started an even worse period, honestly, for everybody in the entire region, because that was the Iranian expansionist game, and that was really the biggest seed that they had planted in the 80s. And we've dealt with them until recently. Israel humbled them for now, anyway, but also along the way had to humble their sponsors in Iran. So what Israel can't let happen is they can't let southern Syria become like South Lebanon, which was a terror mini-state no man's land. And the first to sort of establish his area along the border would keep it.
I hope that it goes for the Kurdish model. Let me go to the other big story out of Israel this afternoon. Lead story at the Times of Israel. Under U.S. pressure, Netanyahu says Israel, quote, regrets Gaza church strike, is probing it. How perilous a moment is this for Israel?
I think it's more so than it has been recently because there was a bit of settler violence, a tragic act of settler violence in the West Bank recently, and there have been scuffles in a Palestinian Christian town there, village, and somebody was killed, a Palestinian was killed, and Mike Huckabee, who is the ambassador to Israel and who is obviously hugely pro-Israel. I mean, he's sort of the embodiment, right, of the Christian Zionist mindset, and he doesn't generally complain about settlements or anything in the West Bank, but he did make sure to raise this privately and publicly. And so the bombing of the strike on the church coming right after that, I think it's a difficult moment precisely because they're already in a position where they have to take some action to show the U.S. ambassador that they're serious about protecting the Christians in the area. And so already in a bit of hot water over that. Now, Huckabee attended Bibi's trial the other day, the hearing, and brought him a Bugs Bunny doll. And so he's not, it was intended as a show of support. So, it's not like there's a crisis over this, but you definitely don't want a pattern take place, especially when an issue is in the headlines. And this issue, right, of the faith of Christians.
Did we lose your headphone there? We lost your ability to hear you. You got to put it back in because now we can't hear you, Seth.
You can't hear me?
It must have aggravated. Yeah, you're back. So you're back in time.
Okay.
I don't know what happened.
Sorry.
I think you pulled something out and out it went. So here's my question. We remember the unfortunate strike on the food kitchen, and that lasted a few days. Then we had a series of stories about Israeli atrocity A, Israeli atrocity B, Israeli atrocity C. It doesn't seem to me that American support has slipped at all for Israel under Team Trump. Have you seen any indication that it is?
No, among the public, it's still going in both directions. Among the public Democrats, it is still softening. But if you mean in terms of the administration, no, I haven't seen any of that. Honestly, I think that President Trump was very happy with the way that things went in terms of the strikes on Iran's nuclear program. He wanted them to be limited. They were limited. There were reports that Bibi had wanted a longer campaign and maybe hitting a few more facilities just in case, or hitting these facilities a couple times. Trump was in control, and he said, "Here's what I want. Here's what we're willing to do," and that's what they did. And Bibi was immensely appreciative, right, in public and in private for him. And so I think that he's feeling good about the U.S.-Israel relationship right now, and crucially, the amount of control he has over it, and that
right.
is President Trump. He likes to be in the driver's seat.
30 seconds. Is the anti-Semitism problem a bigger one on the left or on the right?
Well, it's anti-Semitism itself is not a partisan thing, but right now the problem is more prevalent on the left because it comes in the guise of anti-Zionism. And so when you see it on the right, anti-Semitism is usually this out and out blood and soil nationalism stuff, and everybody condemns it because it's obvious. But the trying to paint itself as just anti-Zionism helps it sort of sneak in the door of legitimacy, and that gives it a head start.
Yeah, that's Mr. Mamdani's approach, but he's an anti-Semite, and there's no one ever going to persuade me that he isn't. Seth Mandel, thank you for joining me. Follow him on X at Seth A. Mandel. Listen to the Commentary Podcast every day. Like and follow them on YouTube and make Matt Continetti happy. And I want you to join my team at oilfacts.com. By my team, I mean we are sponsored by oilfacts.com and the Prairie Operating Company, and we are trying to make fossil fuels great again and especially keep up with the Chi-Coms. I'm joined by Lou Basinese, Vice President of Market Strategy. Lou, how is OilFacts going, and what was the genesis of this? I love it because energy is freedom. Doug Burgum and I get together, and all we do is talk about, can we persuade Americans we need more energy right away?
It's abundance. It's human flourishing, right? So yeah, the genesis was simply we realized a few years ago that this was the one frontier of the culture wars that was not being litigated or defended in the public square. And we said, this is really the industry as its own as a whole was just falling back in line with the progressive movement in terms of climate change, renewables. And we said, look, we at least have to tell the other side of the story. Let's do it with facts. We don't have to do it with feelings, and let really smart Americans make up their own minds as long as we empower them with the real facts and the real information.
Now, most of those are collected at oilfacts.com. But once people get smart about the fact nothing happens without fossil fuels in America, we are dead in the water, specifically against the Chi-Coms, but really against the world. What do we do with people who are empowered by that knowledge? What do we ask them to do?
So I think we're coming together as a grassroots organization to be the resistance and the voice of reason. We want to empower people to combat your neighbor's misinformation, to communicate with your elected officials that you're all for American energy independence. I mean, you're talking about the Chi-Coms. It's absolutely right. I mean, the biggest thing in the headlines today is AI. And guess what AI needs? AI is power hungry. And the Chinese have been adding their electricity power generation for years on end. Since 2000, they've increased power generation by 10,000 terawatt hours. That's more than 6 times the US over the same period, because we've been focusing on renewables, but they've been doing it with fossil fuels, namely coal and oil and gas. So I think our big motivation is to get everyone informed and then equip them to go out and then just be disciples of the truth about fossil fuels.
What does Prairie Operating Company do? Are they primarily natural gas, or are they both oil and natural gas?
So we're primarily oil. We're very oily, about 70% oil. We're focused in Colorado. So most people look at Texas for oil. We're actually in northern Colorado in Weld County, which tried to seed into Wyoming a few times. So it gives you an idea of the political climate there. Very friendly to what we're doing, but it's also one of the cleanest molecules produced because of stringent regulations on not flaring gas. So we're just a small but rapidly growing American oil and gas company that's looking to just not do it from an investment side as a publicly traded company, but also from the political just education side.
Well, that's why I love oilfacts.com. I want people to be smart so that they can aggressively engage in conversation about the necessity. I told your CEO when he was on, I think Landman did more for the argument than anything I've done over 35 years of broadcast talking about energy as freedom. But nevertheless, you got to carry it home with actual facts. And so I'm curious about Weld County. I know it pretty well. I know Colorado pretty well. Do they support you out there? Do they actually want your jobs, or are they trying to shut you down?
No, they very much are supportive. We have a great relationship with the locals there, from the labor force all the way into the government. They've had listen, part of it is 80%, I believe, just over 80% of tax revenue comes from the oil and gas industry. So you talk about fossil fuels, everything related to life. In Weld County, fossil fuels is fueling their local economy. So it makes it unique in that instance. We have our labor force that lives and works there. They don't have to be in man camps and then go back home, every 12 weeks. But it's a great relationship. It's a good working relationship. Look, we have to have those partnerships between politics and industry. And I think we're fortunate enough to have that in Weld County.
Now, the biggest story of the week, and people missed it, is that $50 billion is going into Pennsylvania to produce energy, to produce AI. $50 billion. Now,
yes,
it's a Steelers land. I'm a Browns fan, so I'm not happy about that. But I am very happy that people figured out our energy grid is insufficient and our energy baseload isn't close to what we need. What's the key fact among the oil facts that people need to know about the baseload we have to get to?
Yeah, the key fact is we have to increase the baseload. We've basically been flatlined for the last 20 years. I mean, at about 6,000 terawatt hours. So the fact is this, there's no such thing as an energy transition. It's an energy addition. We need all of the above. So we need coal, we need oil, we need gas. We do need some solar and wind, but they have to stand on their own economics. They can't make it more expensive to generate electricity. So, and I feel you as a Browns fan because I'm a Giants fan, for what that's worth.
Oh, well, no, we're worse, but you're close. And we're not signing Danny Jones. Lou, good to talk to you. I hope we meet in the Super Bowl. And before then, oilfacts.com, America. Join our team. Energy is freedom. We want everyone to flourish. And to do that, We need fossil fuels. Oilfacts.com. Thank you, Lou. Former Senator Jim Talent is chairman of the National Leadership Council at the Reagan Institute. And Senator, I want to begin where I began the show in Syria. 45 minutes ago, Syrian state media reported more Israeli strikes near Swida, where atrocities occurred earlier this week inflicted upon the Druze population. Do you think we can trust Jolani?
No, I don't. What I hope is that we can trust him to do what he thinks is in Syria's and his regime's long-term interest. And, with the changes in the Middle East, Israel has now emerged as the hegemon of the region, provided it has the support of the United States. And so as a result, Trump could see that coming. And so remember, in his Mideastern trip, he lifted the sanctions on Syria on conditions that they not massacre the Kurds, who are our friends, and they not militarize southern Syria, which would be a threat to Israel. So, and he's got the Saudis working on him too. So the idea is to get him to decide he can't be a threat to his neighbors. He can't just massacre people the way Bashar Assad did. He needs to move towards normalization. And if he does that, then he'll get the economic connections to make his regime secure. So we'll see what he does. But no, I don't trust, if you mean, do I trust his humanitarian impulses or anything like that? No. But, Trump is offering him carrots and sticks.
I listened to Aviv Redigur today talk to an Israeli Druze about what happened in Sweden, and he's got an MO and he's following it out. And the only analog I can come up with, after the first Gulf War, we established a no-fly zone over Kurdistan, and we protected the Kurds. Do you think Israel is going to do that for the Druze in southern Syria?
Well, it's interesting because Israel has shown us that they have the power to control their strategic environment, and they're starting to use that power. They have a long-standing connection with the Druze, and they have a national interest in keeping southern Syria non-militarized. They don't want another southern Lebanon. So I think they're going to enforce those interests. Now, I do think there is a chance here that Jelani just doesn't have control, or he doesn't have complete control. I think we should leave our minds open to that possibility because he doesn't control the country. So, but yes, the Israelis are going to pursue their national interests, and they have a long-standing connection to the Druze. They're going to protect their allies and their friends. That's what a hegemon does.
Now, you see, I have in the back of my mind, the transition goes from Osama bin Laden to Zawahiri to Zarqawi to al-Baghdadi. And they were all killers and cutthroats and Salafists. So when I see the Alawites getting massacred, I put that down to payback for Assad, who was an Alawite. But coming after the Druze, that just seems to me to be theological violence, which is the worst kind.
Yeah, if Jelani is behind it, although the Druze, of course, also supported Assad because it's part of their, I believe, I'm not all that familiar with the Druze religion, but I think it's part of their religious precepts and their philosophy to support whoever happens to be in power. And so they did, they were loyal to the Assad government. So there's a lot of motives working here, I think it's too early to draw definite conclusions, except that Israel is going to protect its national interests. The idea of Israel bombing Damascus, a year ago, who would have figured that would be happening? But they have
to do it. They are flexing.
Yeah,
now, let me ask you about your level of surprise at seeing NPR and PBS and CPP defunded. I never thought I'd see this day. I'm very happy to see it. What do you think?
Oh, I have to say how pleased I am. I voted for that 30 years ago, and actually, the expenditure was much more justifiable then than it is now. Listen, number one, the administration and the Congress want to reduce spending, and the first place they're looking is at the discretionary budget because you're not going to be able to convince the American people we need to bring the cost curve down on, say, Social Security, while we're wasting money either on NPR or on, drag shows in Afghanistan or something like that. So there's important substantive reasons for this. I've never been comfortable with the government funding journalism. The Canadians do that, and it's inherently corrupting. And then if you looked at Catherine Mayer's performance before the congressional committee, I mean, it was one of the worst things I've ever seen. They're getting what they deserve.
It wouldn't have been hard to pretend. When was the last time you were on PBS, Senator? You're not a hard guy to find. You know everybody. You talk to everyone. When was the last time you were on PBS?
Well, I've done our local stations. I mean, if I have any regrets about this, is that the local stations I think are often better. I have done those shows, but I can't remember when I was on the national outlets. I mean, certainly not since I left office.
It's just not that hard to be fair. It just isn't that hard to be fair. And I'm very glad they took this step. Now, my last question, I learned from Senator Lankford yesterday that reconciliation can't touch Social Security. It can only touch Medicare and Medicaid. Okay, what do we do with Medicare? What is there possibly to be done? I know what to do with Social Security, raise the retirement age, you might index benefits, there are things. What can we do with Medicare?
I think the healthcare programs are the most promising ones for reform. I believe for years that there is so much. First of all, there's a lot of outright fraud. There's also a lot of money that, because of the incentives in the program, is basically wasted. I think if we'll adopt the kind of reforms Paul Ryan worked for and passed through the House when he was Speaker, he might be somebody you want to have on. If we can get transparency in pricing in the system, and the administration is really pushing the hospitals to do that, and if we can introduce competitiveness, more competition in the system, and restructure the incentives so that the doctors and the providers get paid more when they keep people healthy, I think we can save over 10 years trillions in the healthcare program. Social Security is hard.
I will go find the former speaker. I had on former Speaker Gingrich today. Go ahead, Jim.
No, Paul is really the expert on that, and he worked at it, and the House passed some good bills when he was Speaker. They just couldn't get anything done in the Senate.
Well, now I am a Medicare guy. I'm covered by Medicare. It is awful, right? I'm paying a lot of money for things that doctors won't take, and so somebody's got to fix it. Jim Talent, good to talk to you, my friend. Talk to you again next week. Looking forward to catching up on the British Open tonight. Those golfers might need this. Relief Factor, one of our great sponsors. I'm in the Relief Factor studio. Whenever you play in the British Open, you are on rugged terrain, and usually the weather. I'm watching Scotty Scheffler right now, and he's having a good hole. Bit amusing. Many people will know what I'm talking about from the Sweet Meteor of Death repost. But Relief Factor will help golfers. I always talk about what people do to exercise, whether or not they're out on the boat, whether or not they're on water skis, whether they're trundling along, walking, running at the gym. No matter what they do, they're gonna be sore if they do more than they normally do, or if they're doing something new. And mild aches and pains, the kind that nag at you that never go away, especially the commuting kind, this is what you want. ReliefFactor.com. I take it every day in the first hour of the program. I remind you, hours 2 and 3, 1-800-4, and the word relief. The starter pack, this looks just like this, 3-week supply, $19.95, less than $1 a day. You take 3 packs a day for the first week, 2 packs a day for the second week, 1 pack a day for the rest of your life. Why? Because they help your body's natural anti-inflammatory system to get rid of the minor aches and pains that nag, otherwise disturb your blissful, enjoyable existence. Try Relief Factor, 1-800-4, the word relief, or go to their website, find the starter pack at $19.95 at ReliefFactor.com. Finally, let me close the program today by again asking everyone who can hear me, whether you're watching on the Salem News Channel, whether you're listening in your car, the devastation in the hill country of Texas is beyond scale. The story has kind of moved on. People are absorbing the grief. They know how many people died, 135 and more than 100 still missing and presumed lost. But they don't know that beyond that immediate searing grief, the loss of children especially, there is devastation far and wide in the communities in the hill country that got hit by a once every 500-year disaster. So many people lost everything. Now, we've got first responders from all over the country going down there. They don't want too many people at one time, but they're bringing generators and power saws. They're doing all that good work. But whether or not they're the disaster victims or the volunteers, they need what Food for the Poor delivers, relief kits. $50 pays for one relief kit. All we ask you to do is one. But if you can do 10 and send $500, that's great too. It would be best if you send as much as you could because we can trust Food for the Poor. They've sponsored many campaigns on the program. I've partnered with them for years, fetching Mrs. Hewitt, and now I have donated to them for years, and we will on this campaign as well. That's why I'd like you to go to hughhewitt.com and find the Help Texas banner at the very top of the website. Help Texas banner at the very top of the website. Or you can text my name, Hewitt, Hewitt, to 51555. Hewitt to 51555. And their phone number is 855-359-4673. Did I get that right, guys? 855-359-4673. But best to go to hughhewitt.com and hit that banner, Help Texas. Thank you in advance for being generous and thinking about these people.